The grand ballroom fell into an uncomfortable silence as Isaiah walked toward the Steinway concert grand piano. Every eye in the room followed him, some with curiosity, most with contempt, a few with barely concealed amusement. He was wearing his only suit, bought secondhand from a thrift store 3 years ago. The sleeves were slightly too short now. His shoes, though polished to a mirror shine, couldn't hide their age or the careful stitching where his mother had repaired them countless times. The chandeliers above cast dancing shadows across the marble floor. The piano sat in the center of the room like a throne waiting. Isaiah's hands trembled slightly at his sides, not from fear, but from anticipation. In the corner, his mother Grace stood frozen, her knuckles white as she gripped her serving tray. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Victor Ashford, the renowned concert pianist, leaned back in his chair with a smirk playing at his lips. His diamond cufflinks caught the light as he crossed his arms. He whispered something to the woman beside him, and they both laughed softly. Isaiah reached the piano bench and paused. For just a moment he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Would he really dare to play? Would this boy, this son of a maid, really challenge one of Boston's most celebrated musicians? The question hung in the air like smoke. But there was something nobody in that room knew about Isaiah. Something that was about to change everything. The Harrington estate had never looked more magnificent. It was the annual charity gala, the social event of the season in Boston's elite circles. Women dripped in diamonds and designer gowns. Men wore tuxedos that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Champagne flowed freely. The finest catered food adorned tables draped in silk. The Harrington family had been Boston aristocracy for 5 generations. Their wealth came from shipping real estate and investments that had multiplied over decades. They were the kind of family that appeared in society pages that had buildings named after them that moved in circles where money was never discussed because everyone simply had it. Grace had worked for the Harringtons for 15 years. She had started when Isaiah was just 4 years old, shortly after her husband died. The job came with a small apartment above the garage and a steady paycheck that allowed her to raise her son. She cleaned, she cooked, she organized. She was invisible in the way that servants often are to the wealthy, noticed only when something was needed or something went wrong. Isaiah had grown up on the edges of this world. He had played in the servants' quarters while his mother worked. He had done his homework in the kitchen, while elaborate dinner parties happened in the dining room. He had learned early that there were 2 worlds separated by more than just walls and doorways, separated by something invisible, but absolute. Tonight was supposed to be just another event. Grace was working, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Isaiah had come to help carry supplies from the car. He wasn't supposed to be seen by the guests. He knew the rules. But then Victor Ashford arrived. Victor was 42, handsome, in a polished way that came from wealth and privilege. He had studied at Juilliard, performed at Carnegie Hall, recorded albums that critics praised. He moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, never been made to feel less than. His performance that evening was flawless. He played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with technical precision and passionate intensity. The guests erupted in applause. Women dabbed at their eyes. Men nodded approvingly. Victor stood, bowed gracefully, and soaked in the adoration like sunshine. It was supposed to end there. It should have ended there. But Mrs. Catherine Harrington, the youngest daughter-in-law of the family, had recently discovered something. She had been walking past the old music room, a space rarely used anymore, and heard piano music. Beautiful piano music. When she investigated, she found Isaiah practicing on the old upright piano that had been gathering dust for years. Catherine was different from the rest of her family. She had married into wealth, but came from a middle-class background. She still remembered what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. Now flushed with champagne, and perhaps wanting to share something she found genuinely interesting. Catherine spoke up during the applause for Victor. "You know we have another talented pianist here tonight." The room turned to her. Victor's smile faltered slightly. "Grace's son Isaiah plays beautifully. I've heard him practice. He's entirely self-taught." The words hung in the air. Grace felt her stomach drop. Isaiah, who had been standing near the kitchen doorway, felt dozens of eyes suddenly find him. Victor's expression shifted from confusion to amusement, to something harder to read. "Is that so?" His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it, a self-taught pianist. How charming! Someone in the crowd laughed. Others murmured amongst themselves. Victor stood adjusting his cufflinks. "Well, we can't let that talent go unappreciated. Please join me." He gestured toward the piano with exaggerated courtesy. It wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge. It was a dare. It was an opportunity for entertainment at someone else's expense. Grace's eyes found her son's across the room. She shook her head slightly, pleading, "Don't. Please don't." But Isaiah had spent his whole life being invisible. He had spent 19 years watching from the margins, being reminded in 1,000 subtle ways that he didn't belong, that his dreams were too big, that people like him didn't become people like them. He stepped forward. "I'd be honored," he said quietly. And that's how Isaiah found himself walking across that marble floor toward that piano, with every privileged eye in Boston watching and waiting for him to fail. The murmurs grew louder as Isaiah crossed the ballroom. He could hear fragments of conversations sharp as glass. "Is this really happening? Poor thing, he doesn't know what he's walking into. This should be entertaining. I can't believe Catherine put him in this position." Victor returned to his seat in the front row, settling in like a king preparing to watch a jester perform. He leaned toward the elderly gentleman beside him and stage whispered just loud enough to be heard, "I do hope he at least knows which end of the piano to sit at." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Polite, refined laughter, but cruel nonetheless. Isaiah reached the piano bench. The Steinway was magnificent, probably worth more than his mother would earn in 10 years. The keys gleamed. The wood was polished to perfection. It was an instrument made for masters, for people who had studied at prestigious conservatories, who had private tutors and perfect practice schedules, and all the privileges that money could buy. He was acutely aware of his ill-fitting suit, his worn shoes, his calloused hands that came from physical labor, not just from piano keys. Victor called out from his seat, "Do you need sheet music? Or do you play by ear?" The question was designed to sound helpful, but everyone caught the condescension. "I know the piece," Isaiah said quietly. "Oh, and what piece might that be?" Isaiah paused. He knew this was the moment. He could choose something simple, something safe, and maybe walk away with his dignity partially intact. Or he could do what he had come to do. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece you just played. The room exploded in murmurs. Victor's smile froze. Someone actually gasped. "That's quite ambitious," Victor said, his voice tight now, the amusement gone. "That piece takes years to master. It's considered one of the most technically demanding concertos in the repertoire." "Surely you're joking." "I'm not joking," Isaiah replied. Grace felt tears sting her eyes. She wanted to run to her son to pull him away, to spare him this humiliation. She had spent his whole life trying to protect him from exactly this kind of moment, this kind of exposure and judgment. But she also knew her son. She knew the steel in his spine that he had inherited from his father. She knew that once Isaiah set his mind to something, nothing could stop him. Victor stood again, and this time there was no pretense of civility in his expression. "Fine. By all means. Show us what you can do." He gestured toward the piano with a sweeping motion. "Though I must warn you, I've been playing since I was 4 years old. I studied with masters. I've performed in the greatest concert halls in the world. This isn't some party trick you can pull off with a few YouTube tutorials." The cruelty was open now. The masks of politeness had dropped. This was no longer about music. This was about putting someone in their place. This was about reminding everyone of the natural order of things. Isaiah sat down on the bench. He adjusted it slightly, settling into position. His hands hovered over the keys, and for just a moment he was transported away from this hostile room, away from the sneering faces and whispered insults. He remembered another piano in another time. Isaiah was 7 years old the first time he heard a piano. It wasn't a concert or a recording. It was real live music drifting through the halls of the Harrington estate on a Tuesday afternoon. Someone was practicing in the music room. He had been playing with toy cars in the hallway, while his mother cleaned nearby rooms trying to be quiet and invisible as she had taught him. But the music pulled at him like gravity. He followed the sound creeping closer until he reached the doorway of the music room. Inside, old Mrs. Harrington, the family matriarch, sat at a beautiful grand piano. Her fingers moved across the keys with surprising grace for someone so elderly. The melody was sad and sweet at the same time, and it made Isaiah's chest ache in a way he didn't understand. He must have made a sound because Mrs. Harrington stopped playing and turned. Isaiah froze, terrified. He wasn't supposed to be there. Children were meant to stay in the servants' quarters, but instead of scolding him, Mrs. Harrington smiled. "Hello there. You're Grace's boy, aren't you?" Isaiah nodded, unable to speak. "Do you like music?" He nodded again. "Come here." Hesitantly, Isaiah entered the room. It smelled like old wood and lemon polish. The piano was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Mrs. Harrington patted the bench beside her. "Sit." He climbed up his feet, dangling well above the pedals. Up close, the piano was even more magnificent. The keys were smooth and cool under his small fingers when she encouraged him to touch them. "Press that one," she instructed, pointing to middle C. He did. The note rang out pure and clear, and something inside Isaiah's chest expanded. Now this one, and this one, and this one. Together, they played a simple melody. Just 5 notes. But to 7-year-old Isaiah, it felt like magic. That afternoon changed his life. Mrs. Harrington, perhaps lonely, perhaps bored, perhaps genuinely moved by the boy's wonder, made him an offer. "There's an old upright piano in the storage room near the garage. Nobody uses it anymore. If your mother says it's all right, you can practice there." But she held up a finger. "You must be very quiet, and you must never bother the family." Can you promise that Isaiah promised? For the next 3 years, that dusty storage room became his sanctuary. The upright piano was out of tune and missing a few keys that worked properly, but to Isaiah, it was perfect. He taught himself by any means he could find. He watched free YouTube videos on an old phone his mother had been given by the Harringtons when they upgraded. He borrowed library books about piano technique and music theory. He printed out free sheet music on the library computers. But mostly, he just played. Hours every day after school. He would do his homework as quickly as possible, help his mother with whatever she needed, and then slip away to that storage room. His fingers learned the geography of the keys. His ears learned to hear the relationships between notes. His heart learned to speak through music in ways his voice never could. Grace worried at first. Music wasn't practical. It wouldn't pay bills or open doors for a black boy from their kind of background. But she saw something in Isaiah's eyes when he played something that reminded her painfully of her late husband, and she couldn't bring herself to take it away from him. When Isaiah was 10, disaster struck. One of the Harrington sons checking the storage areas heard piano music. He investigated and found Isaiah. The man wasn't cruel, but he was firm. This had to stop. The storage room needed to be cleared out. The piano needed to be removed. It was inappropriate for the Help's children to be using family property. Isaiah was devastated. Grace apologized profusely, terrified she would lose her job. But old Mrs. Harrington intervened one last time. She was in her 80s by then, her influence in the family waning, but she still commanded respect. She declared that the storage room piano was hers to do with as she wished, and she wished for Isaiah to have it. She had it moved to the small garage apartment where Grace and Isaiah lived. It barely fit in their tiny living room. It was battered and out of tune and missing keys. But it was theirs. Mrs. Harrington died 6 months later. At her funeral, Isaiah played a simple hymn on the church piano. Grace cried through the entire performance. It was the first time Isaiah had played in front of anyone besides his mother and the old woman who had given him his first chance. From age 10 to 19, Isaiah continued teaching himself. He worked part-time jobs after school and during summers to help his mother with bills. He bussed tables, cleaned offices, did yard work. His hands developed calluses from work and from piano keys. He was exhausted, constantly catching sleep between work and practice and school. His music teachers at the underfunded public school he attended recognized his talent, but had limited resources to nurture it. Private lessons were impossibly expensive. Music conservatories might as well have been on Mars. But Isaiah kept playing. Not because he thought he would ever make a career of it. Not because he believed the world would ever give someone like him a real chance. He played because he had to. Because the music inside him demanded to come out. Because when his fingers touched those keys, he wasn't a poor kid from the wrong side of town. He was something more. He applied to Berklee College of Music when he was 17, knowing he couldn't afford it. He was rejected. Not good enough, they said, not polished enough. He needed formal training to compete with students who had studied with masters since childhood. The rejection broke something in him, but it also hardened something. He worked harder. He practiced longer. He pushed himself until his hands cramped and his back ached and his eyes blurred with exhaustion. By the time he was 19, Isaiah could play pieces that would challenge professional pianists. Not just play them, but truly perform them with feeling and nuance and soul. Nobody knew this except Grace, who heard him late at night playing in their small apartment, pouring his heart into music that nobody else would ever hear. Until tonight. To understand Isaiah, you had to understand his father. Marcus was his name. Marcus Carter. He had died when Isaiah was 4 years old, too young for Isaiah to have clear memories. What Isaiah knew came from his mother's stories, photographs, and a few old recordings. Marcus had been a jazz musician. Not famous, not successful in any traditional sense, but talented. He played saxophone in small clubs around Boston, making just enough to scrape by. He had a day job too, working construction, but music was his real life. Grace had met him at one of those clubs. She had been young, working as a waitress, dreaming of something bigger than her circumstances. Marcus had played a solo that night that made her cry. After his set, he came to her table, and they talked until the sun came up. They were married within a year. Isaiah was born 2 years later. Marcus never made it big. The jazz scene was tough, competitive, and often closed to black musicians who didn't fit certain molds. But he never stopped playing. He would come home from construction sites covered in dust, and the first thing he would do was pick up his saxophone. "Music isn't about money, Grace," he would tell her. "It's about keeping your soul alive." When Isaiah was 3, Marcus was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. He fought it for 18 months. Grace worked 3 jobs trying to pay medical bills that insurance barely touched. They lost their apartment. They moved in with Grace's aunt. Everything fell apart except for one thing. Marcus kept playing. Right up until the end, when he was so weak he could barely hold the saxophone, he would play. Sometimes just a few notes, sometimes a full melody that made everyone in the room weep. The day before he died, Marcus asked Grace to bring Isaiah to the hospital. The boy was 4 years old, confused about why Daddy was so thin and pale and connected to so many machines. Marcus held his son's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. "Isaiah," he whispered. "That's a prophet's name. Prophets speak truth that others don't want to hear. They see things others don't see. Promise me something." Isaiah, not understanding, nodded. "Promise me you'll find your music. Not mine. Yours. Promise me you'll never let anyone tell you that you're not good enough, that you don't belong, that your dreams are too big. Promise me you'll speak your truth even when they don't want to listen." "I promise, Daddy." Marcus died that night. Grace was left with a 4-year-old son crushing debt and memories of a man who had loved music more than security, who had chosen beauty over practicality, who had died too young with too many songs left unplayed. She took the job at the Harringtons because she was desperate. It wasn't what she dreamed of, but it was stable. It came with housing. It meant her son would be safe and fed. She swallowed her pride and put on a uniform and learned to be invisible. For years, she thought that was enough. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Give Isaiah a chance at a stable life, something his father had never been able to provide. But then, Isaiah found music. At first, she was terrified. It felt like watching history repeat itself. She knew where this path led: the heartbreak and disappointment and crushed dreams. She wanted to protect her son from all of it. But how could she take away the thing that made his eyes light up? How could she silence the music when she knew Marcus was watching, somehow knowing his son had found his truth? So Grace made a different kind of sacrifice. She worked longer hours to save money for books and sheet music. She endured the subtle condescension from the Harrington family, the way they treated her like furniture, because it meant Isaiah had a safe place to practice. She wore her invisibility like armor protecting her son by accepting her own diminishment. She watched Isaiah grow into a remarkable young man. He was kind, thoughtful, hard-working. He never complained about their circumstances. He studied hard, kept his grades up, helped around the house, and every spare moment he played piano. Other kids his age were going to parties, playing sports dating. Isaiah was practicing Rachmaninoff in a tiny apartment, fingers flying over keys, lost in worlds of sound. Grace sometimes wondered if she should encourage him to be more realistic, to study something practical, to let go of impossible dreams. But then she would remember Marcus wasted away in that hospital bed, still insisting that music was worth everything. She would remember the promise her son had made to a dying father. And she would stay silent, let him play and pray that somehow, someday, the world would give her son the chance he deserved. She never imagined that chance would come like this, in front of hostile strangers, with humiliation as the price of admission, with everything to lose and so little to gain. But here they were. Isaiah sat at the Steinway, his hands hovering above the keys. The bench was perfectly adjusted. The instrument was flawlessly maintained. Everything was ready, except his mind was a chaos of memories and emotions. He thought of his father, a man he barely remembered, but whose presence he felt constantly. He thought of his mother standing somewhere in this room, probably terrified, probably regretting Catherine Harrington's well-meaning attempt to showcase his talent. He thought of all the hours, the thousands and thousands of hours, the 4 a.m. practice sessions before school, the nights when his hands were so tired they shook, the pieces he had worked on for months until every note was perfect. The music theory he had studied by candlelight when they couldn't afford to keep all the lights on, the free videos he had watched repeatedly memorizing every lesson, the library books he had read cover to cover. Nobody in this room knew any of that. They saw a poor kid in an ill-fitting suit who was about to embarrass himself. They saw entertainment. They saw someone who needed to be reminded of his place. Victor's voice cut through his thoughts. "Whenever you're ready. Though if you need more time to prepare, we understand." More laughter. Sharper this time. Isaiah closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and he let everything else fall away. The hostile room, the expensive clothes and jewelry, the whispered insults and barely concealed contempt, the years of being invisible. The rejection letter from Berkeley, the tiny apartment, the worn shoes, the tired eyes of his mother, the weight of all of it. He let it all go. And in the silence of his mind, he heard it. The music, not as notes on a page or techniques to master, but as something alive, something that lived in his bones and blood and breath. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The same piece Victor had just performed with technical perfection and practiced emotion. Isaiah knew he couldn't compete with Victor's training, his pedigree, his access to the best instruments and teachers money could buy. But Isaiah had something Victor didn't. He had desperation. He had pain. He had a lifetime of feeling powerless, voiceless, invisible. And he had music as his only language for all of it. His hands steadied. His breathing slowed. The chaos in his mind crystallized into focus. In the corner of the room, Grace closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Not to God exactly, but to Marcus. If you're watching, help him now. Please. The crowd's murmuring faded to expectant silence. Someone coughed. Crystal clinked as someone set down a champagne glass. The chandeliers overhead cast dancing light across the piano's polished surface. Victor leaned forward in his seat, arms still crossed, smile still mocking. But something in his eyes suggested he was paying closer attention than he wanted to admit. Catherine Harrington, who had inadvertently set this entire scene in motion, bit her lip nervously. She had meant well, but now she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The elderly members of Boston's elite society adjusted their seats, preparing to witness what they assumed would be a brief, awkward performance, followed by polite applause and a swift return to champagne and conversation. The younger generation pulled out their phones, some already recording, anticipating a viral moment of someone failing spectacularly. But none of them, not one person in that entire ballroom, was prepared for what was about to happen. Isaiah opened his eyes. His hands descended to the keys. and the first note rang out into the silence like a bell, clear and perfect, and absolutely certain. And everything changed. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 emerged from the Steinway with a richness that immediately commanded attention. These weren't the hesitant, nervous sounds everyone expected. These were the notes of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The first theme unfolded with a delicate power that made several people in the audience unconsciously lean forward. Isaiah's hands moved across the keys with fluid certainty. His left hand established the deep, rolling bass line, while his right hand sang out the melody with a clarity that seemed impossible from someone allegedly self-taught. Victor's smile faltered. Just slightly. Just for a moment. But it faltered. The piece continued. Rachmaninoff had written this concerto during a deep depression, after years of being told he had no talent, that he should give up composition. He had poured all his pain and doubt and eventual triumph into this music. It required not just technical skill, but emotional depth and understanding of suffering and transcendence. Isaiah understood. His fingers found the complex passages, the ones that required years of training to execute properly. Passages that Victor had just played with mechanical precision. But Isaiah played them differently. Not better, not technically superior, but with something raw and real that made the music breathe. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. She had heard Isaiah play countless times, but never like this. Never with this intensity. Never with this confidence. This was her son, not just playing music, but speaking through it, saying everything he had never been allowed to say out loud. The murmuring in the room had stopped completely. The laughter died. The smirks faded. People were actually listening now, genuinely listening, because something in the music demanded it. A flashback hit Isaiah as his hands moved through a particularly complex run. He was 14, sitting at the battered upright piano in their apartment at 2 a.m. His mother had fallen asleep in her chair, exhausted from a double shift. Isaiah had school in 4 hours, but he couldn't stop. He was working on this exact passage, had been working on it for weeks, and he couldn't get it right. His hands cramped. His eyes burned. He wanted to cry from frustration. But he kept going. Again and again. Playing the same 16 bars until his fingers remembered, until the music flowed without thinking, until it became part of him. Now, in this ballroom, those same 16 bars flowed from his fingers like water, effortless and perfect, because of those countless hours nobody had seen, nobody knew about, nobody would ever celebrate. The first movement continued its emotional arc. The famous lyrical second theme emerged, the melody that audiences around the world loved, that had been used in movies and commercials until it became almost cliché. But in Isaiah's hands, it wasn't cliché. It was new. It was personal. It was a love letter and a protest song and a prayer all at once. An elderly woman in the third row felt tears start to slide down her carefully powdered cheeks. She didn't understand why. She had heard this piece performed by professionals dozens of times. But something about this performance, this moment, this impossible boy at the piano, broke through her emotional armor. Another flashback. Isaiah, at 16, working his third consecutive 10-hour shift at a warehouse loading boxes in brutal summer heat. His hands were covered in cuts and bruises. His back screamed with pain. His co-workers were older men who treated him with a mix of pity and distant kindness. During lunch break, Isaiah sat alone, and watched a video on his phone of a concert pianist performing Rachmaninoff. He watched the man's hands, studied every movement, tried to understand how someone created such beauty. His own hands were wrapped in bandages. They hurt so much he wasn't sure he could practice that night. But he did practice. He always practiced. Because the alternative was giving up on the only thing that made him feel like he mattered, like he had something valuable to offer the world. Now those same calloused, scarred hands were pulling music from this magnificent Steinway that made the previous performance seem hollow by comparison. Victor was no longer smiling at all. He sat rigid in his chair, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on Isaiah with an expression that was hard to read. Shock, perhaps. Anger, certainly. But also something else. Something like recognition. The understanding that what he was witnessing was genuine talent, undeniable skill, perhaps even genius. The first movement built toward its climax. The tempo increased. The technical demands grew more intense. This was where lesser pianists faltered, where the piece revealed who truly had the ability to master it. Isaiah's hands flew across the keys. The left hand maintained the complex bass rhythms, while the right hand executed runs that should have required decades of formal training. His entire body was engaged now, swaying slightly with the music, his face showing the emotional intensity of the piece. Another memory surfaced. His mother standing in the doorway of their tiny living room watching him practice. He hadn't known she was there. He finished the piece and turned to find her silently crying. "What's wrong, Mom?" he had asked, frightened. "Nothing's wrong, baby. Everything's right. You sound just like your father. But Dad played saxophone." "I don't mean the instrument. I mean the soul. You play like someone who needs to, not like someone who wants to. That's the difference." In the ballroom, the first movement reached its powerful conclusion. The final chords rang out with authority and passion. Isaiah's hands lifted from the keys for the briefest moment before transitioning seamlessly into the second movement. This movement was different, quieter, more introspective. It began with a simple melody in the right hand, supported by gentle, flowing accompaniment in the left. This was the heart of the concerto, the most emotionally vulnerable section where the composer's soul was most exposed. Isaiah played it with a tenderness that was almost painful to hear. Each note was placed with perfect care. The melody sang with a kind of yearning that anyone who had ever wanted something impossible could recognize. Grace was openly crying now, not bothering to hide it anymore. She saw her 4-year-old son promising his dying father he would find his music. She saw her 7-year-old discovering the piano for the first time, his face lit with wonder. She saw every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of doubt and determination that had led to this. The second movement unfolded like a flower opening. The melody developed, transformed, became more complex without losing its essential simplicity. Isaiah's touch on the keys was sensitive, controlled, drawing sounds from the instrument that seemed impossible, given his supposed lack of formal training. But Isaiah had been trained. Not by expensive teachers in prestigious schools, trained by necessity. By obsession, by love, by the ghost of a father he barely remembered, and the present devotion of a mother who had given up everything. Catherine Harrington was crying too. She felt vindicated and terrified at the same time. Vindicated that she had been right to mention Isaiah's talent. Terrified of what this moment might cost both Isaiah and Grace, because the world she lived in didn't forgive upstarts who challenged the natural order even when they were genuinely talented. The second movement continued its gentle, heartbreaking arc. There was a passage where the melody climbed higher and higher, reaching for something just beyond grasp, before falling back to earth, resigned but somehow still hopeful. Isaiah played this passage with his eyes closed, lost completely in the music. And for just a moment, he wasn't in a hostile ballroom performing for an audience that had wanted him to fail. He was in his tiny apartment playing for his mother. He was in that storage room discovering magic for the first time. He was nowhere and everywhere, existing only in the music. The second movement came to its quiet, contemplative conclusion. The final notes hung in the air like smoke dissipating slowly into silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was absolute and electric. And then Isaiah began the third movement, and all hell broke loose musically. The third movement of Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto explodes into life like a sudden storm. After the contemplative beauty of the second movement, the finale is pure energy, a celebration of technical virtuosity and emotional release. Isaiah launched into it with a ferocity that made several people in the audience physically recoil. This was not gentle. This was not safe. This was music as weapon, as proclamation, as triumph. His hands were a blur across the keys. The left hand established driving rhythms, while the right hand executed complex melodic passages at breathtaking speed. This was the section that separated professionals from amateurs, that required not just skill, but endurance, stamina, and absolute mastery. Victor stood up. He didn't mean to. It was an involuntary response. He stood and stared at the stage with an expression of complete disbelief. Because what Isaiah was doing was impossible. You couldn't teach yourself to play like this. It took years of guided instruction, hundreds of hours with professional teachers who knew how to develop technique properly. It took access to perfect instruments from a young age so your hands learned the right touch, the right approach. It took money and privilege and connections and all the things Isaiah had never had. And yet he was doing it, right there in front of everyone, doing the impossible. The melody of the third movement is jubilant, triumphant, but underneath it, there's something else. A kind of desperation, a sense of someone fighting not just for victory, but for survival. Rachmaninoff wrote this while climbing out of his own darkness, and that struggle is embedded in every note. Isaiah knew that struggle intimately. Another memory crashed over him as his hands continued their dance across the keys. He was 17, sitting in the financial aid office at Berklee College of Music. He had made it past the first round of admissions, had submitted a recording that the preliminary judges said showed promise. But the tuition was $45,000 a year. Even with financial aid, he would need to cover at least $20,000 annually. There were no scholarships available for someone at his skill level. He would need to work full-time while attending full-time. And even then, it probably wouldn't be enough. The financial aid officer, a kind woman with tired eyes, had looked at Isaiah with sympathy. "I'm sorry," she said. "I wish there was more we could do. You're talented, but you need more development before you'd qualify for a merit scholarship. If you could afford a few years of private instruction, maybe then. But private instruction cost $100 an hour. Where would a kid working minimum wage jobs come up with that Isaiah had walked out of that office feeling something die inside him? Not his love of music. That could never die. But his hope of ever being recognized, of ever being taken seriously, of ever getting the chance to prove himself to the world. He had gone home and cried for the first time since his father's funeral. Grace had held him, while he sobbed. And when he finally exhausted himself, she said, "Baby, they don't get to decide what you are. Only you decide that." Now his fingers were deciding, declaring, proclaiming to this room full of skeptics and snobs exactly what he was. The technical demands of the third movement continued to escalate. There's a section about 2/3 through where the right hand plays a cascading series of notes, while the left hand maintains a completely different rhythm. It's fiendishly difficult. Professional pianists practice this specific section for months. Isaiah executed it flawlessly. The melody builds and builds, becoming more insistent, more powerful. The dynamic range expands from delicate to thunderous. Isaiah's whole body was involved now, swaying with the music, his face a mask of concentration and emotion. Another flashback. His mother coming home late one night from work, exhausted beyond words. Isaiah should have been asleep. He had school the next morning, but she heard the piano and found him still practicing at midnight. "Baby, you need to sleep." "I know, Mom. Just one more time through this section." She had sat down on their worn couch and watched him play. And despite her exhaustion, despite her aching feet, and her worry about bills, and her fear that her son was setting himself up for heartbreak, she felt pride swell in her chest. "Your father would be so proud," she had whispered. Isaiah had turned to her with tears in his eyes. "You think so? I know so." In the ballroom, the music reached its penultimate climax. This is the section where many pianists, even good ones, start to falter. The endurance required is immense. The hands tire. The mind struggles to maintain focus. Mistakes creep in. Isaiah played with the same intensity he had started with. No fatigue showed. No uncertainty crept in. He was beyond thought, now existing purely in the flow of the music. The elderly woman who had cried earlier was now gripping her husband's hand so tightly, her knuckles were white. She didn't know why this performance was affecting her so deeply. She had never experienced music quite like this, where every note seemed to carry not just sound, but meaning story life. The final build-up began. The melody transformed one last time, becoming a full-throated song of victory. The left hand created a foundation of rolling chords, while the right hand soared with the main theme stated now with complete confidence and power. Another memory, the last one. Isaiah, age 10, sitting at the battered upright piano that Mrs. Harrington had given them, just hours after her funeral. He was playing a simple melody, tears streaming down his face. Grace had come to him. She knew, baby. She knew what she was giving you. She knew it wasn't just a piano. What was it then? A chance. She gave you a chance. Now in this ballroom in front of these people who had laughed at him, who had assumed he was nothing, who had seen him as entertainment and not as a person, Isaiah was taking that chance and turning it into something magnificent. The final cascade approached. This is the climax that audiences wait for, the technical showpiece that demonstrates absolute mastery. It's a descending run of notes, both hands in octaves, covering the entire range of the keyboard in just a few seconds. It has to be perfect. Even a single wrong note is glaringly obvious. Isaiah's hands rose. Time seemed to slow. And then they descended like lightning, executing the run with pristine accuracy and breathtaking speed. The final chords approached. 3 massive statements of the main theme, each one bigger and more powerful than the last. These chords required the full weight of the body behind them, required every ounce of strength and will. Isaiah struck the first chord with such force that some people in the audience jumped. The second chord followed, even more powerful. And then the third, the final chord, the last statement. The period at the end of a sentence that had taken his entire life to write. Isaiah threw everything he had into it. All his pain, all his hope, all his love for his mother and his dead father, and the music that had saved his life. All the years of being invisible, of being dismissed, of being told through 1,000 subtle messages that people like him didn't get to dream like this. The chord exploded from the piano like thunder. And then silence. The silence that followed the final chord was absolute and profound. It stretched for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4, 5. Isaiah's hands remained on the keys, his head bowed, his breath coming in short gasps. The performance had taken everything from him. He felt hollowed out, exposed, vulnerable in a way that was almost painful. In that silence, everyone in the room was processing what they had just witnessed, trying to reconcile what they had assumed would happen with what actually happened, trying to understand how the son of a maid, self-taught and underprivileged, had just delivered a performance that rivaled anything they had ever heard. Grace stood frozen in the corner, her hands clasped over her mouth, tears streaming freely down her face. She was watching her son, her beautiful, brilliant son, and she was seeing his father in him so clearly, it hurt. She was seeing every sacrifice justified, every doubt erased, every hard day worth it. And then someone started to clap. It was the elderly woman who had been crying. She stood up, her hands coming together in sharp, clear strikes that shattered the silence. Her husband joined her. Then Catherine Harrington. Then someone else. Then another. And then the entire room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It wasn't the refined, measured appreciation that usually followed performances in spaces like this. It was thunderous. It was visceral. It was people responding not to what they thought they should feel, but to what they actually felt. People stood. The standing ovation built like a wave row by row until every single person in that ballroom was on their feet, clapping, some of them with tears in their eyes, some with expressions of shock, some with genuine joy. Isaiah slowly lifted his head. He turned on the bench and looked out at the sea of standing, applauding people, and he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. These were the same people who had laughed at him 15 minutes ago, the same people who had seen him as entertainment, as someone to mock. But something had shifted. The music had done what music does. It had bypassed all the social constructs, all the prejudices, all the assumptions, and spoken directly to the human heart. His eyes found his mother. Grace was openly sobbing, her face a mixture of joy and relief and overwhelming pride. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and in that moment no words were needed. Everything they had been through together, everything they had sacrificed and endured and hoped for, it was all there in that look. And then Isaiah saw Victor. The famous pianist was standing, but he wasn't clapping. Not at first. He was staring at Isaiah with an expression that was complex and troubled. There was shock there, certainly, but also something that looked like pain, or maybe recognition. Slowly, as if it cost him something, Victor brought his hands together. He began to clap. Not enthusiastically, not joyfully, but he clapped. And as he did, something in his face changed. The arrogance fell away, leaving something more honest underneath. He began walking toward the stage. The applause continued as Victor made his way through the crowd. People stepped aside for him. He reached the piano where Isaiah was now standing, uncertain, still trying to process everything. Victor stopped in front of him. The two men stood facing each other. the privileged, trained, successful pianist who had everything handed to him, and the self-taught kid who had clawed his way to this moment through sheer determination and talent. Victor extended his hand. "I was wrong," he said, his voice low enough that only Isaiah could hear over the applause. "I was wrong about you. About everything." Isaiah hesitated, then took the offered hand. Victor's grip was firm. "You're not just talented," Victor continued. "You're extraordinary. I've studied with masters. I've performed in the greatest halls in the world. And what you just did..." He paused, struggling for words. "I've never heard anything quite like it." The applause began to die down as people realized something was happening between the two pianists. Victor raised his voice so the room could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have been playing piano for 38 years. I have heard the best of the best, and I can tell you without hesitation that what we just witnessed was one of the finest performances of Rachmaninoff's second concerto I have ever heard." The room erupted again, even louder this time. Victor turned back to Isaiah, speaking quietly again. "I have connections. Juilliard Curtis Institute, New England Conservatory. You should be studying there. You should be performing." "This talent..." He shook his head. "It would be criminal to waste it." Isaiah felt his throat tighten. "I applied to Berkeley. They rejected me. I can't afford private training. I don't have..." "You have me now," Victor interrupted. "If you'll accept my help, no strings attached, you've already proven you don't need validation from people like me. But if you want access to the opportunities you deserve, I can provide that." Isaiah looked past Victor to his mother. Grace was being embraced by Catherine Harrington, both women crying. His mother caught his eye and nodded, her face radiant with joy and permission. "I don't know what to say," Isaiah admitted. "Say yes," Victor replied. "Say yes to your future." The room had gone quiet again. Everyone watching this exchange. Isaiah thought of his father, that promise made to a dying man. He thought of his mother, every sacrifice she had made. He thought of Mrs. Harrington, who had given a 7-year-old boy his first chance. He thought of all the hours, all the struggles, all the times he had wanted to give up, but kept going. "Yes," he said. "Yes." The applause that followed was deafening. People surged forward, wanting to congratulate Isaiah, to shake his hand, to be part of this moment. The same people who had mocked him now wanted to claim connection to him. But Isaiah barely noticed them. He pushed through the crowd toward his mother. When he reached her, Grace pulled him into a fierce embrace. She held him like she had when he was a child, when the world was scary and she was his only safety. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered into his ear. "So proud. Your father would be too. We did it, Mom. We actually did it. No, baby, you did it. This was all you." "It was us," Isaiah insisted. "Everything we've been through, every sacrifice you made, this was us." They stood there, mother and son, holding each other, while the chaos of celebration swirled around them. In that moment, all the years of struggle, all the pain and doubt and fear, it all transformed into something else. Something that felt like victory, like vindication, like hope. The party continued around them, but Isaiah and Grace existed in their own bubble for several minutes. When they finally pulled apart, both wiping tears from their faces, they found themselves surrounded by well-wishers. Catherine Harrington was one of the first to reach them. She took both of Isaiah's hands in hers. "I am so sorry," she said earnestly. "I should have asked you first before putting you on the spot like that. I never meant to put you in such an uncomfortable position." Isaiah shook his head. "You don't need to apologize. You gave me a chance. You saw something in me worth sharing. That's more than most people would have done." Catherine turned to Grace. tears still on her cheeks. "I've worked with you for 3 years, and I never knew. I never bothered to ask about your life, about your son, about anything beyond what I needed from you. I'm ashamed of that." Grace, always gracious, squeezed Catherine's hand. "You've always been kind to us. That matters more than you know." Other members of the Harrington family approached, offering congratulations. Some were genuine. Others seemed performative people who wanted to be seen supporting the sudden star. Isaiah accepted it all with the same quiet grace he had shown throughout the evening. Victor appeared at his side again, this time with his phone out. "I've already made some calls. I have a friend who teaches at the New England Conservatory. She's expecting your call tomorrow. And I spoke to the director of the Boston Symphony Youth Program. They want to hear you play." Isaiah felt overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "Because I remember what it was like to be young and full of music that needed to come out. The difference is I had every advantage. Wealthy parents who paid for the best teachers. Access to perfect instruments. Time to practice without worrying about work or money. I took all of that for granted." He paused. "You had none of that, and you achieved this level anyway. That's not just talent. That's something rarer. That's the kind of dedication and passion that deserves support." He handed Isaiah a business card. "This has my personal number. Call me next week. We'll figure out a plan. In the meantime, I want you to come to my studio. I have a Bösendorfer Imperial that you should play. A real instrument, not something practiced on in secret." Isaiah took the card with trembling hands. "Thank you." "I don't know how to thank you." "Play," Victor said simply. "Keep playing. Share this gift with the world. That's all the thanks I need." As the evening wore on, Isaiah found himself in conversation after conversation. People who had ignored him his entire life suddenly wanted to know everything about him. Where did he learn? How long had he been playing? What were his plans? He answered patiently, though the attention was exhausting. His mother stayed close, a steady presence beside him. Around midnight, as the party began to wind down, Isaiah and Grace finally found themselves alone again, standing in the now empty ballroom. The Steinway still sat in the center of the room, silent now, but somehow still radiating the energy of what had happened. "Can you believe this?" Isaiah asked, his voice soft with wonder. "Yes," Grace said. "I've always believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself. I kept thinking about Dad, about that promise I made. You kept it, baby. You found your music. And more than that, you made them listen." Isaiah walked back to the piano. He sat down on the bench one more time and gently placed his hands on the keys. He didn't play. He just sat there feeling the smooth ivory under his fingers, trying to commit this moment to memory. "What happens now?" he asked. Grace came to stand beside him. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now you get to decide. For the first time in your life, you get to choose your path instead of having it chosen for you by circumstance. It's scary, I know, but it's also wonderful. You've earned this, Isaiah. Every opportunity that comes from this night, you've earned it with years of work that nobody saw. You saw." "Yes," she smiled. "I saw. And I will always see you no matter how far you go." They stood there together in the empty ballroom, the chandeliers casting soft light around them, the piano waiting patiently for the next person to bring it to life. Isaiah thought about tomorrow, about the phone calls he would make, about the possibilities opening up before him like flowers blooming. But mostly he thought about this moment right here with his mother beside him and his father's memory watching over them both. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. There would be new challenges, new obstacles, new people who would doubt him or try to hold him back. The world didn't change overnight just because one performance went well, but something fundamental had shifted. Isaiah had proven to himself and to everyone else that talent and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds, that dreams weren't just for people born with privilege, that beauty could come from anywhere from anyone if given even the smallest chance to bloom. 1 year later, the concert hall at the New England Conservatory was packed. Students, faculty, families, and music lovers filled every seat. The lights dimmed. The crowd quieted. Isaiah walked onto the stage wearing a tuxedo that actually fit him, purchased with money from his first scholarship check. His hair was neatly trimmed. His shoes were new. But his eyes carried the same intensity they always had. He sat at the concert grand piano, a magnificent instrument that responded to his touch like a living thing. He had spent the past year studying with some of the best teachers in the country, refining his technique, expanding his repertoire. But he hadn't lost what made him special, that raw emotional connection to the music that couldn't be taught. In the third row sat Grace, wearing a new dress and a smile so wide it seemed to light up the room. Next to her sat Catherine Harrington, who had become not just an employer, but a genuine friend. Victor Ashford was there too, having appointed himself as something of a mentor and advocate. The program notes for the evening listed several pieces, but everyone knew what they were really here for. They were here to witness the continued emergence of a remarkable talent. They were here to be part of the story. Isaiah began to play. Not Rachmaninoff this time. Something different. He had chosen Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 14, the Moonlight Sonata. It was a piece about beauty emerging from darkness, about finding light in seemingly hopeless places. As his fingers moved across the keys, Isaiah thought about everything that had led to this moment. The dusty storage room, the battered upright piano, the rejection letters and closed doors, his mother's tired eyes and unwavering support, his father's promise extracted from a 4-year-old child who didn't understand what he was agreeing to. The music flowed from his hands, filling the concert hall with its melancholy beauty. People in the audience closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Some cried, some smiled. All of them felt something, because that's what Isaiah's playing did. It made people feel. When the first movement ended, the silence before the applause was electric with emotion. Isaiah continued through the second and third movements, the piece building from quiet contemplation to passionate urgency. The final notes rang out and faded into silence. Then applause warm and genuine. Isaiah stood and bowed. He looked out at the audience and saw his mother on her feet, clapping with tears running down her face. He saw Victor nodding with approval. He saw strangers who had been moved by his music. But more than that, he saw something else. He saw a future. He saw possibility. He saw a life where he could do what he loved, where his voice could be heard, where his dreams weren't just fantasies, but achievable goals. The journey from that hostile ballroom to this concert hall had been intense and challenging. There had been moments of doubt, times when the imposter syndrome crept in when Isaiah wondered if he really belonged in these prestigious spaces. But then he would sit at a piano, any piano, and his hands would find the keys, and the music would remind him who he was. Not defined by where he came from, or what he lacked, but by what he could create, what he could share, what he could make people feel. Later that night, back in a new apartment that the scholarship helped pay for, Isaiah sat at his own piano, not the battered upright, but a proper instrument, a gift from an anonymous donor who turned out to be Mrs. Catherine Harrington. He played quietly, not practicing anything in particular, just exploring melodies that came to him. Grace sat on the couch nearby, reading a book, comfortable in the silence and the music. Mom Isaiah said, pausing his playing, "Yes, baby. Did you ever imagine this?" Any of this, Grace set down her book and looked at her son. "I imagined you being happy. I imagined you finding something that made your life meaningful. Whether that looked like this or something else, I just wanted you to feel like your life mattered." "It does," Isaiah said. "And it's because of you. Everything is because of you." "No." Grace shook her head. "I just kept the doors open long enough for you to find your way through. You did the rest." Isaiah turned back to the piano. He played a few more notes, then spoke without looking at his mother. "Sometimes I still can't believe it, that people actually want to hear me play, that I get paid to practice, that this is my life now." "Believe it," Grace said. "You earned every bit of it. I wish Dad could see this. He does, baby. Wherever he is, he sees. And he's so proud." Isaiah played the opening notes of his father's favorite jazz standard, a melody he had learned from old recordings. It sounded strange on the piano, this saxophone music translated to keys, but it was beautiful in its own way. As he played, Isaiah thought about the message he wanted to share, the story his life was becoming. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't some simple narrative of talent triumphing over adversity. It was more complicated than that. Yes, he had talent, but talent alone wouldn't have been enough. He also had a mother who sacrificed everything. He had people along the way who gave him chances, small and large. He had stubbornness and determination, and a refusal to accept the limitations others tried to place on him. And he had music. Always at the center of everything, there was music. The lesson wasn't that anyone can achieve anything if they just work hard enough. That was naive and ignored the very real barriers that poverty and prejudice create. The lesson was more nuanced. It was that talent exists everywhere, in all communities, in all circumstances, and that when we create pathways, when we give chances, when we listen, instead of assume, when we judge based on ability rather than background, we discover greatness in unexpected places. Isaiah's story was exceptional, but it shouldn't have to be. There were thousands of talented kids like him, kids with potential that would never be realized because they never got the chance he did. That reality was painful to think about, but it was also motivating. He had decided in the months since that night in the Harrington ballroom that he wouldn't just accept his good fortune and forget where he came from. He would pay it forward. He would teach. He would mentor. He would advocate for programs that gave underprivileged kids access to music education. Because Mrs. Harrington had given him a chance with that dusty piano in the storage room. Because Victor had swallowed his pride and offered support. Because Catherine had spoken up when she could have stayed silent. Because his mother had never stopped believing. Now it was his turn to be that person for someone else. Isaiah finished playing his father's song. The last note faded into silence. Grace had fallen asleep on the couch, her book resting on her chest, a peaceful expression on her face. He stood quietly and got a blanket, draping it gently over his mother. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Isaiah returned to the piano. He sat there in the quiet apartment, his hands resting on the keys, and he felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought him here, for every struggle that made him stronger, for every closed door that taught him to find another way, for every person who had seen potential in him when he couldn't see it himself. The path ahead was still uncertain. He had a long way to go before he could call himself a professional musician. There would be setbacks and disappointments and moments of doubt. But he also had something unshakable now. He had proof that he belonged, that his voice mattered, that his music had value. And he had a promise to keep, not just to his father, but to himself. To keep playing, to keep growing, to keep sharing the gift he had been given with anyone willing to listen. Isaiah placed his fingers on the keys and began to play softly a melody of his own creation, something new, something that belonged only to him. It was hopeful and melancholy at the same time, looking backward with gratitude and forward with anticipation. This was just the beginning, and it was going to be beautiful. So what's the lesson here? What should you take away from Isaiah's story? Maybe it's that talent deserves to be nurtured, regardless of where it comes from. Maybe it's that we should never judge someone's potential based on their circumstances. Maybe it's that dreams are worth fighting for even when the odds seem impossible. Or maybe the lesson is simpler than that. Maybe it's just that we should listen. Really listen. To the quiet voices. To the unlikely sources. To the people we might otherwise overlook, because genius doesn't announce itself with credentials and pedigree. Sometimes it comes in worn shoes and an ill-fitting suit. Sometimes it's hiding in a storage room or a tiny apartment. Sometimes it's been there all along, just waiting for someone to give it a chance to be heard. Isaiah's hands touched those piano keys and changed his life. But more than that, he changed the lives of everyone who heard him play. He reminded them of something essential about humanity, about art, about the potential that exists in all of us when we're given the opportunity to shine. What's your piano? What's the thing inside you that's waiting for a chance to emerge? What would you do if someone finally gave you the platform you deserved? Think about it, and then make it happen. Because the world needs your music too, whatever form that music takes. If Isaiah's story moved you, if it inspired you, if it made you feel something, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me about your own dreams, your own struggles, your own journey toward the impossible. And remember, every master was once a beginner. Every success story started with someone taking a chance on themselves when nobody else would. Your moment is coming. Be ready for it.